Mr. Dupuy, just for those people watching, we've talked about kind of a corporate governance, as in, not as in there's a corporation with somebody at the top, but it's kind of Mr. Barton spoke of kind of almost a committee of the whole when they face tough times. I'm sure it varies, but at times a company feels as if it may exit a line of business. I don't know if you've done that, y'all been expanding, but you may exit a geographic location which formerly you were in, now you're not. How do you manage that? Because you've got employees there who are invested, but you're going to pull out of a geographic area and you leave them stranded. Tell us that.
In our case, we've been fortunate in that we don't operate plants or facilities where you have large numbers of employees that could be displaced. But we do operate in a variety of communities, and on occasion our contract may not be renewed. Again, fortunate in our case in that we are expanding, and we actually are under a shortage of medics and paramedics. And so we have been able to then take employees who are sort of displaced, if you will, and allocate them and use them elsewhere in the organization. So, Senator, we've not come across that specific issue.
Mr. Barton, you suggested that there's a price of wheat in Kansas apparently went too high, too much protein in it, everybody wanted it. You should have bought the French stuff. But that said, did you have to do layoffs? How do you manage that? Do people voluntarily cut my pay?
In that case, no, there were no layoffs. I think it really, and I think there was a reference earlier about kind of specifically with public companies, kind of the requirement for quarterly reporting and quarterly performance and quarterly targets. Obviously, we have those targets, we have those reporting, we have those targets, but our financial model is built on sustainability. It's not built on meeting quarterly targets. So I think that's what certainly helped us through. I mean, I think back to 2022, and fiscal 22 wasn't a great year, but we kind of strengthened our foundation and set us up for future success, basically allowing financial performance to dip slightly, so that we could be stronger on the other end.
Dr. Blasey, you had mentioned the need to have access to capital markets in order to finance these. Presumably, one, the Small Business Association is there. Secondly, obviously, banks are there. I think you're proposing something different than those two. Tell us the shortcomings of using an SBA loan or of a traditional bank or bonding or whatever to do the financing.
Thank you for that question, Senator. It's really a core question. First of all, the Small Business Administration has generally not been friendly to ESOP financing. And I know this isn't the SBA committee, but we'll just leave it at that. There's a lot to be said about that. So that's not a really good route. Secondly, most ESOPs, if they're, say, manufacturing ESOPs or service ESOPs, don't have the hard assets to get more than 40 to 60%, sometimes even less than that, of the capital needed to do an ESOP leverage buyout from a senior lender, from a bank. So that's where you need another.
So let me ask, though.
Yes, sir.
There's a certain amount of discipline there. The U.S. government has a bad history of investing in dogs. Solyndra is always the example that people use. Politically motivated, turned out not so well. And then that burns everybody, and we start passing on things that maybe we should do. So how do we, if we correct the valuation, because that really seems to be the issue, you could go to a senior lender if we have the Kane-Marshall bill, and therefore maybe get the correct valuation and the correct purchase price, as opposed to inject because my side is kind of nervous about this, as opposed to inject the federal government into what will ultimately could be a political decision. You see where I'm going with that?
Yes, I see where you're going. Well, I'm not an investment banker, so I don't want to give a definitive response on that, but I will say I have studied these kinds of transactions and done interviews with professionals who have done them. And even with the correct valuation, it's hard for a potential ESOP transaction to get the amount of capital it needs to get to effectuate a majority or 100% ESOP buyout from a retiring business owner.
And in that answer, you imply that the buyout does not have to be 100%. I could sell 60% of my business. Mr. Rourke could sell 60%, retain 40%, with maybe a game plan to sell in the future or maybe to pass to his heirs, correct?
That's absolutely true. And there are some wonderful examples around the country of 30 and 40% ESOPs where the families want to keep the other 60%, and they work together with the employees. Family businesses, our research shows, like profit sharing, they like employee ownership, they like their employees.
So the federal loan program would allow the luxury of 100%, but the absence of that program does not necessarily eliminate the ability to create an ESOP, even if it's only partial employee ownership.
Probably in some cases, yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, Senator.
Senator Hickenlooper.